Here we go.
And when they went to the queen to tell her her subjects had no bread, do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
Who took the bomb?
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. It's the little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of The Peasant's Perspective. Oh, I got to turn off the video. I have the video set on like auto repeat, Doug, so they're constantly going up twice. Doug, it's good to see you. Everybody, audience, this is Doug Wyatt, one of my good January 6 friends. Doug, it's good to have you here.
Good morning, Taylor.
Now you're from Baltimore. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your basic J6 story, how we know each other.
I'm just your basic blue collar American. I wouldn't even say that I'm diehard Republican more than I'm just like America first, America only. And what I saw, like many other Americans, I saw fraud. I saw fraud at the highest levels. And you had like kind of ignored a lot of the fraud or thought that maybe this is just the way things work. But at some point, after the riots, the burning down of our cities, there's just absolute attack on everything that's right and everything that's American. I had enough, man. So they started to stop the steal. At first there was three of them. There was three stop the steal protests in Washington, D.C. I attended the first one, and it was just an extremely peaceful, multicultural, patriotic event, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed going there to the nation's capital. That's where we take our grievances to. I'm not going to go and, you know, rob your shoe outlet and throw a brick through the window and protest. I'm going to go like a patriotic blue collar American to where I'm supposed to air my grievances at the Capitol in front of our representatives. I thought it was important to go up and show and say, hey man, what you guys are doing is a problem, and we want some representation. So
I gotta stop you there. One of the things, because I had a bullhorn, right? There's the famous bullhorn that I had on J6, and one of the things my attorney said to me as we were getting ready for trial, and we didn't put on a defense, right? But he goes, one of the bad things about having a bullhorn is you can hear everything people say. But one of the good things about you having a bullhorn is you can hear everything you say. And I'm there saying, like, I'm here to redress my grievances with Congress. And I'm using all the right phraseology. And when my trial, they ended up only playing about 12 seconds. They didn't play any of my speech or talking. And that was one of the things. He's like, well, as far as protest, you're pretty well established. You were there under First Amendment, under First Amendment grounds. But yeah, normal patriots don't go throw rocks through business windows. They show up to the people who actually make decisions.
So by the time that January 6th came up, I mean, you have been seeing years of this. You have been seeing years of people taking a knee for the national anthem. People like Colin Kaepernick and Megan Rapone. That's why I'll never buy a pair of Nikes again. If those are the people you're going to put up there for me to buy shoes, I won't buy your shoes no more. But whatever. Point being is that you were just inundated and drowning in absolute hate from the left, and now you can't even vote your way out of it. They've completely stolen the election. They have COVID running around, and no matter what you think about COVID, about who made it or whatever, there's zero chance that they should be forcing me to take a vaccine, that they should not have our kids in school. I mean, it was like government authoritarianism, to the umpteenth degree. So I didn't feel like I wanted to go to January 6th protest. I felt like it was a duty to go and protest this fraud. Our government's out of control. They were then and they are now. I try to look at it like when I was entering the workforce as a young man in the early 90s, my parents would have handed me a country that was $3 trillion in debt. Okay. $3 trillion in debt, early 90s. And I look at the country I'm handing over to my children, and I understand that we're $37 trillion in debt. It's just a disgrace. There's no excuse for it. It has to stop right now. So, just want to make this point before I forget about it. You did a podcast 2 days ago when there was a young man that was interviewed by Michael Knowles, and he's like, burn it down. He's a Trump supporter. I'm with him. Burn it down now, right now, because all those debts are going to get paid by somebody at some time. They're not going away. So what do we do? Sit in our hands and hope for Donald Trump's not coming to save you, man. And I love me some Donald Trump, but he's swimming in a swamp, man, and he's drowning. He just is. So I look at our political landscape, and I don't see hope. I see problems, and the worst is yet to come. I mean, look at the fraud that's happening in Minnesota right now. You can't even get an honest set of reporting. You have one man, Nick Shirley, who's putting out his content, and you have major news organizations that are running up there to defend the fraud. Yeah, it just makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I get you. You know who Grant Stitchfield is?
I do not.
So Grant Stitchfield was on he was on Newsmax for the longest time, and before that, I'm not sure exactly where he is. Here, let me put this up and tell me if you recognize him. Oh, give me just a second here. Do you recognize him?
I've seen him before.
All right. Well,
I
let's
have.
listen to.
I see him on X. I know I see him on X.
Yeah, he's got a show. I think his show now is on News Media. He's over there with Chris Cuomo. And it's kind of, I don't know where he was before Newsmax. He had a nightly show on Newsmax, right? He was one of their nighttime uh, mainline hosts. And I don't know what happened, some scandal. I don't know if it was Me Too oriented, but something between like the our last month in prison and two or 3 months after we got out of prison, somehow he made the transition out of Newsmax. So, anyways, he did this little clip yesterday, and he's getting high level sources that say 2026 is going to be the year of accountability.
Listen to me. I've got big news when it comes to retribution for all the crimes committed against us. I know you're disappointed in 2025 and what the Trump administration had not done when it comes to that. 2026 is going to be a big year. At least that is what very high-ranking members of President Trump's administration is telling me. I am told that Kristi Noem inside the Department of Homeland Security is using lie detector tests at a rate never seen before inside DHS. She is rooting out the deep state. Also, I am told that, I know it's hard to believe, but investigations are ongoing into not just the Russian collusion hoax, not just J6, not just what they did to us during COVID, also the election engineering scandal and the stolen election of 2020 and beyond. All of these things, I am told, I am promised that investigations are ongoing. So I know how disappointed you are that we are not seeing the fruits and rewards of President Trump coming into office and getting that retribution. 2026 is going to be a good year. Could be a great year when it comes to this. Let that be a warning to those who committed crimes against all of us. 2026 is going to be the year we're coming for you.
What do you think about that? Do you think it's just more bluster from the Trump administration? More rope a dope kind of thing. Give us more time. Accountability's coming. Do you think there can be any significant accountability in 2026 leading up to the midterms? What do you think about that?
I think you're going to have to show me because the best. If I'm gonna predict, future actions, I need to look back at past actions. And we've been told that this is going to happen and that's going to happen and one thing and the other. And at the end of the day, nothing ever happens. And unfortunately, like here's the problem I have. Okay, I, you know, I do construction, from large scale commercial construction to, smaller stuff like home improvement. And I've worked for different companies where they come in and they hire you and they're like, look, we have this problem. The team isn't, doing this, we need to focus on some more quality control. And you get in there and you have 100 people to look after, and you start to realize that there's people who aren't looking to change. They are with the same old, same old. So if you need 100 people and you got a third of them that are fighting you, fire 'em. Get rid of them. You're better off with two-thirds of the workforce that are focused on and committed. And when I look at what happened with the FBI, every American should be disgusted because they should have walked in there. And if you had any involvement in chasing down people like myself, like yourself, violating my civil rights, okay, warrantless searches, sitting across the street from my house, watching me go to work, this is disgusting to me. Those people should be fired. And you should make a point that we serve the Constitution of the United States of America, not either party that gets in the office. And these people violated their oath. How many months did it take for them to fire Neil Team Six? I know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking about, Neil Team Six, where they came out in front of the FBI building and took a knee. That's a political statement by a federal law enforcement agency. Okay. And it took you 7, 8 months to fire 'em? Sorry, there is no change at the FBI. Okay, Dan Bongino, hey man, don't peep down my back and tell me it's raining, dude. You know what I mean? Like you quit, okay, and that's okay. I got it. I understand you got a family and all the pressure, but at the end of the day, you're a quitter. And there's Cash Patel, who the more I learn about Cash Patel, the less I like. Now, I'll tell you, every American should read his book. His book is outstanding. Government Gangsters. That'll give you a good inside view to just to where this corruption happens. The chain of command is broken. Defense intelligence contractors, and it's a mess, man. I get it, but just the same, Cash. I mean, when you have a girlfriend that's suing podcasters because they said something critical, you know it just it's a bad look. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't see any change in the FBI, and I'm far from impressed. Let me tell you something. When the FBI is running after a report done by Nick Shirley, really, this one guy, where was the FBI? I've worked for companies that did federal projects, federal and state projects, okay? Construction companies. And the amount of paperwork that goes into, I mean, they want to see, you can't just subcontract something out to another entity and get away from the paperwork. The federal government and the state government is going to go to that entity and they want to see each individual paycheck for each individual employee. They are going to track every single dollar. And I think that that is a good way to go. Every dollar, every taxpayer dollar should be accounted for. Okay, and you want to tell me that they're up there stealing billions of dollars? Oh, wow, look at this. I'm sorry, dude. The fix is in. They this is just the tip of the iceberg. I look at Baltimore City, I look at Chicago, I look at New Orleans, and it's the same scam over and over and over. We're in a bad way, dude.
I remember when we were in prison, you told me about a Baltimore City school district scam where Fox went in and did some type of investigative reporting and found out there were 1,000 ghost students at a local high school or a school district, kids that just didn't exist, but they were getting funding for. Do you remember this?
Like his name is Chris Paps, and I follow him on both X and Facebook. And this is Fox Baltimore. It'd be like the local Fox channel, and I don't know. They call themselves Fox, or they were. I don't know. All I know is that their investigative reporting is outstanding, and they stick to the story. They estimate that it's 1,000 ghost students that get. They build the state of Maryland, for each student that they, enroll. And so you're talking, it's about a $16 million annual scam. And, you look at Baltimore City schools and, you have dozens and dozens of schools that can't produce one child that can pass the standardized test. Okay. And that's just wrong, man. It's wrong. The Democrat Party should not be doing that to their constituency.
So is Baltimore, like Baltimore is 10 years in front of Seattle. And in the time you've lived around, you don't live in Baltimore, right? You live in Baltimore.
Well, babe, that's okay. We'll work through it. Yeah, I'm about 30 miles north of Baltimore, so I'm not in Baltimore City. I don't reside in Baltimore City. But yeah, I'm
But
about 30 miles north.
you you've watched Baltimore go from a city of like 800,000 people down to 400,000, 600,000, some
Baltimore at the height of its population, I want to say it was just under 1 million people. There'd have been about a million working Americans. A lot of blue collar jobs. It's right by the port. So they would manufacture things. It was a very productive city. It was a beautiful city, man. Baltimore had a lot to be proud of. But over the last 50, 60 years, the population has dwindled down to just over 500,000. I want to say they're about 520,000, 540,000 plus or minus, but it's just incredible to me. You know about the city. You hear about, oh, the city, the city, the city. But like I say, I had a job where I worked for a contractor that did, state-funded projects in the worst parts of Baltimore City. So I spent about 8 years and I got a good look at it. And, I didn't walk into that city and think to myself, oh, those folks shouldn't be, doing this or that. I looked at it and I said that no American should have to live like this anywhere in America. I don't care your race, color, creed. It doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? To me, these are my brothers and sisters in Christ that are absolutely having their lives destroyed. They don't stand a chance. Those kids, you would see groups of kids in them. Where I think about my kids, you know what I mean? My wife and I would work our work arrangements around getting the kids on the bus, taking the kids to daycare. As responsible parents, man, we looked after our kids. We wanted to see them get on that bus. Taylor, in Baltimore City, man, you would see 8-year-old kids walking 5-year-old kids down some of the dirtiest, nastiest streets you can imagine. They've had houses. There's an 8-year-old that died because, or maybe she was 10, somewhere, but a house fell on her. Just think about that. She's walking home from school and a house falls on her. It's a disgrace, man. There's no excuse for what's going on. And when I see Mayor Brandon Scott and Governor Moore, rebuffing the president's effort to send in the National Guard, and I see how these people are living, and they're touting that their crime numbers are down. So at the height of their murder rates, it would have been around 300. This year, I want to say they cashed out at about 140, but they're patting themselves on the back for those 140 murders, like they've done something good. I'm sorry, dude. There's still 140 murders.
and
December
you have to
15th in the city, there was a 14-year-old Taylor, 14-year-old young boy that was shot in broad daylight about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's unacceptable.
I'm just looking up. So, and to contrast that, Baltimore and Seattle, I think, are pretty comparable cities as far as demographic, work. Like you said, it's a blue collar city. Seattle's full of a lot of ports, has a lot of white collar too. But Seattle in 2023 had a high homicide rate at 70 murders. So if Baltimore, which is, I think, pretty similar of a city, is at 100 and, what'd you say, 170?
Down at about 140 murders this year.
140 murders. So you're
Yes,
still
sir.
looking at double the gross amount of murders. And I know Seattle is a larger population today than Baltimore. So, and I consider Seattle not safe, right? Like Seattle's not a safe place to just let people go. And, I'm not going to let my old teenager just go down to downtown Seattle and hang out with his friends. I get really nervous anytime my wife has to be in Seattle after 5 p.m., So, 140 coming down from 300. I mean, that's like war zone type numbers. I mean, that's like living in Mogadishu or something like that after the surge of the surge of American soldiers into there. That's pretty high.
Couple things that, yeah, I want to point out. When I say that Baltimore was a blue collar city, I want to emphasize was, okay? They're not a blue collar city anymore. Those factories have shut down, okay? They've sent those jobs overseas. They're gone, okay? So, there's that. But yeah, man, it's something else that makes no sense to me. When you have the unemployment rate that you do in Baltimore City, why are you giving illegal immigrants temporary identification numbers to legally work on state-funded jobs? That makes no sense to me. Okay. And then every time a bridge collapses here in Maryland, or there's an accident with a road crew, it's all Latinos, man, that get killed doing the work. I mean, they're the ones that are all doing the work. So the reason they do that is because they can call Latinos minorities. You see, when these contracts are handed out, you have to have minority participation. And so the fact that they have Latinos here that can work for so much less, and they can actually meet your minority participation quota, Jesus, Taylor. I mean, the scam is insane. Okay, and let's not forget, we want to talk about the 140 murders. How about the 700? Okay. 700 overdose deaths. I stay on top of the news. But when I was reading through some of this stuff and I came across that number, it about blew me away. So now you start to understand the 100,000 annual overdose deaths that are happening in this country. And so if you're a politician and you're crying about Donald Trump down there blowing up them boats, make your argument, please. Go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say. But please tell me your plan of stopping the fentanyl from coming into this country. You want to look at a web page that'll make you cry? Missing in Baltimore City. Okay, it's a Facebook page, and it's drug addict after drug addict that has families that are just in shambles, man, because of this problem. This isn't just a Baltimore problem. This is all across the country.
Oh yeah, I remember being in prison and being like, we don't need more prisons, we need more rehab facilities. Like half of the guys in prison probably just needed some early intervention rehab type stuff. And I mean, drugs are complicated. People get sucked into their addictions and they'll do anything to get drugs, right? But at the same time, I mean, I remember I had a CO in Missouri one time. He's like, "Yep, you got a guy dealing drugs, and he's got guys over here stealing copper out of houses, committing property crimes. Then he's got some girl that he's got addicted who's over at his place getting drugs, sleeping with him. Meanwhile, she leaves her kids home alone. Neighbor comes over, molests the kids. Now you got a guy in jail for pedophilia. You got a mom in jail for child neglect and endangerment. You got a drug dealer in jail. You got guys over in jail because of property crimes, all because one source of drugs showed up in a community. It just creates absolute carnage in its wake. And I never really saw that until I got into prison. And you just see, it's like everybody has drug involvement. It's a vast majority of our federal system is drug related.
The drugs that got into federal prison should be allowed to happen. It should stop right now. I mean, I was very fortunate to, do time with just good guys, man. Bible study guys, J6 guys. There was one guy there that was there for protesting abortion, peacefully protesting abortion. And, his head was on the chopping block from the federal government, man. They were coming for him. You don't mess up that cash cow. But all I'm saying is that, we had people that would approach us, man, that had drug problems, that were trying to pray their way out of it, they were just looking for help. They were looking for help from other inmates that they could not get from the institution in which they were in. The guards, they didn't care if you were high, man. All they cared about is if you made them do something. So there was no effort to stop this problem, and it's just very wrong. There's no rehabilitation happening in the federal prison system. It's not happening, and I got to think that it's just like that with the state systems are probably even worse. But somebody's got to do so. It's just another broken federal system that it's just broke, man. And it's like nobody's doing anything about anything that I see. It's all fluff. Okay, it's all white noise, man. We're not making any progress, and I think it's time Republicans or people like just come to grips with that fact that we're not winning. 25% of Donald Trump's term's over. He has 3 years to go. And you can't put somebody in cuffs, man, and perp walk them. We haven't got any wins. Look at Jim Comey. He's living he's living good. He's not worried about anything. Neither is Letitia James. I don't want, revenge, Taylor. I would like some justice, though. I want to
Yep.
see justice.
Sapphire Patriot, you asked, Taylor, who is your guest? This is Doug Wyatt, fellow J6er. Doug was like my best friend in jail and prison. We went from DC together all the way to Philadelphia, and then we ended up splitting on the tarmac in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I got onto Con Air, and he went on to a couple, one or two more facilities before he finally ended up in Danbury. And you were in prison with Steve Bannon, right?
Bannon. That was really interesting because you hear his Steve Bannon's podcast, and he's fire. He's on fire. But when we were in prison, man, he definitely toned it down. He taught a civics class. I think he was just generally, interested in the walks of life that these people came from, what their communities is like, what they thought about things. He'll tell you that the biggest demographic of voters to go after is
African
I
American
mean,
vote.
the low propensity, low information voter, the guy who's
Yep.
not paying attention. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like they're the hugest voting block. That's why I appreciate the chemistry that you have with the gentleman that you usually do the show with. Because I
Ron.
can tell that he's not like swimming in the news. He's not like he's probably more representative of the average American. And so when you lay these truths on him, his reaction is priceless. It's like, whoa, wow. I think that he actually connects more with a larger, because you tell him not to start studying the news, man, because it'll ruin that.
Well, he
But
doesn't.
it's a genuine reaction that and you're not there selling some crazy story. It's just no different than Rush Limbaugh. Like the first time I heard Rush Limbaugh speak, he didn't have to come at me with some crazy, presentation. What he said was very simple and it made sense. What you say is very simple and it makes sense. So when you present that to someone who's paying attention, it just makes sense, man.
I want to show this to you here. So this is Peter Bernegger. I don't even know all these people I follow on X sometimes. A federal lawsuit was sent in yesterday pertaining to U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, and his treasurer, Terry E. Sullivan, for smurfing $11,090,385 into his campaign account. So he has been added now to a federal election commission complaint. John Thune, Amy Klobuchar, Senator Warnock, Senator Mark Kelly, Senator of Michigan, and Senator Baldwin of Wisconsin, and all have FEC investigations against them because they were smurfing, right? Which is where you get these ghost people or foreign people to make multiple donations to your political campaign, and you've smurfed their information. They're not really making the donation, you're just using their name and address to make the donation. So why don't things change? Why is it that Lindsey Graham gets up and does his anti-Trump stuff, but then seems to be in Trump's back pocket? Why does John Thune not get rid of the blue slip or the filibuster, right? Why do these guys do what they do? They're in on it. I mean, where do you show up with an extra $11 million in campaign donations? I don't know, some Medicaid fraud, some housing fraud, maybe some kickbacks from some military industrial complex type stuff, and you can funnel it right through Act Blue or Win Red. But they both act the same, right?
The
It's
Democrats
not.
couldn't get away. The Democrats couldn't get away with the fraud that they're pulling without Republicans in on it too. I mean, they're in on it too. There's the uniparty, so they don't have my vote. The Republican Party has lost my vote because of their performance. I could vote for a Republican potentially, but before I got on the phone with you today, I just did a little bit of research about 2020. Remember 2020, and we were going to go ahead and stand firm and not certify this election. And you look at some of the names and some of the people who were supposed to be and now are trying to be again your supporters, or are standing up, not for us individually, but as a country. These people were cowards. They were yellow belly cowards, like Mike Gallagher, out of New York. He quit in 2024. Right after he got the vote on a foreign aid package, and now he works for Palantir. Here was a guy, in 2020, he was saying that, oh, I stand with the, we're not going to certify. But when the rubber hit the road, man, he lost his way, just like Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz and Marsha Blackburn are especially disgusting to me. I can't stand either one of them. How dare you try to slide all these millions of dollars into an appropriations bill for yourself, so you can go ahead and sue the people for looking at your phone bill. And Ted Cruz, there's a reason why he called us terrorists. He called us terrorists. You see, they needed the charade to make it look like it was terrorism, so they could go ahead and violate your civil rights. So they could go ahead and perform warrantless searches on your emails, on your bank accounts. Okay. And then Chris Wray goes in front of Congress and just lies about the FBI involvement, about the threat of domestic terrorism. It was insane that It was insane that this guy can go ahead and lie in front of Congress to appropriate funds for a problem that he's creating, and just there's no accountability. There's no accountability. Ted Cruz will never have my vote for anything after listening to him talk on Tucker Carlson. And then people want to talk attack Tucker Carlson, but just the same, man. When you talk about Israel, who are you talking about? Are you talking about Netanyahu? He was so uninformed.
Is Netanyahu Moses' heir apparent?
He belittled Ted Cruz by asking a couple simple questions about the demographic makeup of Iran. That you're sending, that you're looking to bomb. You should at least educate yourself. I'll tell you what, if you're going to go do an interview with Tucker Carlson, you should educate yourself on this. AMAC, I want to know more about that. It's so when you look at it, Taylor, it's corrupted from top to bottom. Nobody has your back. Okay. You got Donald Trump. I believe that he's genuine. Okay. But just the same, man, below him, we're getting our teeth kicked in. We're getting our teeth kicked in. This isn't the kind of problem that it'll never get solved. The fraud is too great.
Do you remember my Julius Caesar speech that I would give in jail sometimes?
Cross the
Huh?
Rubicon, man.
Huh?
Cross the Rubicon.
Yep, he's got to cross the Rubicon. And I feel like there was a crossing of the Rubicon with the 2024 election. They did what it took. It's my belief, they cooked that server room in Serbia, which took the machine cheat out of the play, which then meant they had to have the ballots on election night, and they didn't know how many ballots they needed to swamp the vote. Obviously, Trump goes to win 2024. But the same thing applies, right? He's got to cross the Rubicon. There's zero chance he's going to be able to cure all of the rot in our government by using the system itself. I mean, between inspector generals who would be tasked with investigating, right? They're going to cover, because they always have. History tells us that inspector generals never produce anything other than some low-level somebody that takes some misdemeanor charge for this massive conspiracy, right? So you can't use that. You can't use state prosecutors and state DAs. Most of them are elected, which means they might be on the dole of a cartel or one of these gay mafias or the Somali mafia or whatever, right? So you can't count on that. You got guys like Ken Paxton in Texas. He's another one of those ones. I have a hard time with him because he totally rejected the J6ers, didn't do anything to help him, and he drinks white wine, right? So it's like not super impressed with some of our champions that are existing in government. Trump can't depend on putting in Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Sure, they're all on board for MAGA, but then they get in. What about the second, third, fourth layer of the FBI? Do you think those guys are executing the orders, right? Like when your son gets contacted by the very FBI agent who investigated him. It's like, dude, you should be in jail, right? What do you mean you're going after people on the left, right? Like, sure, I want you to go after people on the left, but not if you're going to do it the way you went after us. And but at the same time, the only way Trump is actually going to cure any of this is to break the law, right? It kind of comes back to what he tweeted when he was first inaugurated. He who saves the country breaks no laws. It's that Julius Caesar moment where he's going to have to do what Abraham Lincoln did. He's going to have to just declare an insurrection. It's going to have to be broad. He's going to have to go after everybody from corporate officers to media companies to get inside of some of these state governments. You've got legislatures from everything from your federal house and senate to your state houses and senate, all the way down to your school boards. You've got people infiltrated in every layer of government that are covering for the fraud. Like, he's gonna have to pull a big dictator move if we're going to see any meaningful progress. The only other option I see is he has to strike the election apparatus itself. No machines, paper voting, day of. I don't know how he does it, through an executive order. I don't know how he gets there, but the only way to flush out the rot is maybe with a series of fair elections. Maybe we can flush out the rot. But I'm concerned with the low information voter that gets their news from ESPN, that don't know what's really going on, that really think that we're funding daycares and that there's all these kids that need support. You know what I mean? They don't recognize the fraud for what it is. Or any of the other fraud. You know what I mean? Like I worry that we're getting to the point in America where even with a fair election, there might be enough dum-dums out there that don't know what's going on, that'll just vote, however Cardi B tells them to vote.
I think like the black men that I met in prison could see clearly how corrupted the government is. There was no question in their mind. They looked at us like, at least we did something. I mean, that's how they looked at me. I mean, if you believe in something, stand on it. Well, I'm gonna stand on it. Every day I'll stand on it. And I got a lot of respect for them guys, but it was already given to me by them because they could look at CNN and understand that they're being lied to. Tell you what, that used to impress me so much. There's some of these guys that had spent decades in prison, black men, and they would look at CNN and be able to tell you what's really going on, diagnosing from the lie they're being told. Yeah, the gig's up, man. You know what I mean? What you have is useful idiots that you push
As,
out to
Don,
the front
as
to
Donald
stand with the no kings. They are the minority, okay? They don't have backing. I mean, they have some people, but we're smoking them. We are smoking them. What we need is real elections, real paper ballot elections. But I'm gonna tell you, it's hard for me to believe that somewhere, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I'm gonna tell you this, man. It's hard for me to grasp that the founding fathers that built this country, that signed their name on the Declaration of Independence 250 years down the road, are being outsmarted by the likes of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the Cheneys, the Bushes. I'm sorry, man. There is a plan of action that you can take. And I'm saying right now, you know, we the people got the vinegar in our belly for this fight. It has to happen now. So, and when I say, look, when I say for the fight, I want to preface all that by, I'm peaceful. 100%, man. You can't. That's another thing I've been noticing is that they really want you to get angry. They want to do that. I'm not going to do that. I may get excited, sitting here talking to you, but I know, man, that the next time I'm assaulted by the police, I'm gonna go ahead and sit on my hands and I'm gonna let them assault me because that's the hard thing to do, and that's the thing that gets people's attention. They showed them videos on January the 6th, like. Let me tell you something. I didn't go to a planned attack on the Capitol. They run that crap on the news. Planned attack on the Capitol. What I attended was rally, a permanent rally that I was invited to that was advertised on Facebook. That's what I went to. Okay. I don't know about no planned takeover of the Capitol. It's so much crap. And you want to go ahead and throw people in prison for 20 years, for going and protesting your fraud. And while the real crooks, man, they are still in power. They still are. So I don't know what Trump does or what the plan is. And admittedly, I'll say that I don't see his whole plan. I only see this portion of it. But so far, man, I'm incredibly disappointed. I think, if I had to pick between voting for JD Vance and Elon Musk, I'd vote for Elon Musk. You know, I understand why he got the hell out of there. He saw that he wasn't going to go ahead and make any headway. And look what they did to him. That's how you want to talk about domestic terrorism. Okay, look what they did to Elon Musk. They went and they attacked all his Tesla plants. They started selling their stocks. You couldn't drive a Tesla without it getting vandalized. And they forced him on out of government. Okay, he's one of the brightest minds that we have in this country. And this is how you treated that man. I have a problem with that. But basically, that's what it is. If you're patriotic and you're willing to stand up for truth, they'll Elon Musk you right on out of the picture.
Why do you think Elon Musk said that Trump was a pedophile on his way out the door? And do you think that that's reconciled, or do you think that was just a thing he did? I've wondered if it was an actual pincer move to try to create comfort on the Democrats to talk about Epstein, just to have it all backfire. Sounds very 5D chess. I don't really buy into the 5D chess very much anymore, but do you think there was something to that?
Uh, when that guy shot Donald Trump that day, he didn't miss, man. I think that's the shot he was looking for. He waited till Donald Trump turned his head because at that point there was room for error. If he was a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left, Donald Trump could have lived through it. I think that this whole country is ruled over by the CIA. I think that they create chaos purposely because it's in that chaos that they reign supreme. That's why it doesn't matter what the makeup is of your legislature or your presidency. It doesn't matter because they'll just create chaos wherever they can. That's what they do, man. It's like they'll do a school shooting and they'll push for gun control. They'll take the towers down in New York and get the Patriot Act, or get you over there in the Middle East. They just create chaos, and it's within that chaos that they reign. I think that Epstein was an agent of that chaos. I think there's a lot there. And I think that Donald Trump was warned with the shot to the ear that we can come get you too. I think that Charlie Kirk, I think that, one thing about Donald Trump, as I'll say, is that I believe in the power of one man. One man can make a difference. Look at Tom Brady, right? One man. You know what I mean? Look at Martin Luther King, one man. You look at Jesus. That's just one guy, one man. I mean, to me, he's God, right? You know what I mean? But one man can make a difference. So, you know, when they look down the road at someone like Charlie Kirk, who's out there, who's not full of hate and vitriol. This guy, Charlie Kirk, is going into the devil's den. In a place that's been indoctrinated, colleges that have been indoctrinated for decades, and he's able to win over hearts, minds, and souls through peaceful dialect and truth. And those people that reign supreme, they understand what a danger that is. Charlie Kirk was murdered not by one person. I don't believe that. Donald Trump was shot in the ear, not by one person. There's an entity behind this that controls this country. Trying to break that cycle. You know, I'm not sure how to do it, man.
You mentioned this that the CIA is willing to fall the towers to get the Patriot Act. They're willing to, and we're saying the CIA not necessarily because we know for a fact it was the CIA, but all roads lead to Rome, right? Everything ties back to the CIA. But this is a business model. This ruling over the ashes, purchasing discounted assets when countries fail. This is a business model that was perfected by the communist liberal left, specifically behind George Soros. Let's listen to this right here because you brought this up. This is Mike Benz talking about how George Soros built his whole empire in the ashes of the Soviet Union. This is the business model that they're trying to repeat here in the United States.
In fact, there's a great clip. I have it on my X timeline, but it's George Soros openly bragging that the Soros empire was built out of the ashes of the Soviet empire, and that as the Soviet empire receded, the Soros empire picked up the pieces, was his phrase. And this is quite literally true. The assets of the Soviet government and the European governments that were under Soviet effective vassalage were quite literally sold off to the George Soros Management Fund. This happened inside of Russia. It happened in Ukraine. This was done in tandem with USAID in the United States, as well as institutions like the Harvard Institute for International Development. But it was the George Soros Open Society Foundation that played a key role in actually breaking up the Soviet Union inside of Hungary, inside of Poland, inside of Romania. And this was done in tandem with the US government, with the National Endowment for Democracy, with USAID, with the US embassies in the region. The same way that in the United States, Soros incubates these student groups and young people and unemployed people and criminals. The same was done in the 1980s. And you can argue that it had a positive result on the world in that case. Whatever your view on the morality of the tactics used was, that there was brutal Soviet domination in those countries. But the fact is what ended up happening was power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And Soros absolutely corrupted these countries, and we are now living in the aftermath of it. In fact, there's a great
So basically, the lead up to the fall of the Soviet Union, which is, you think of the Soviet Union as their federal government, and then the Soviet satellite states were like the state governments. They gamed the UN in the way they did that. Have you ever heard about this? How the Soviet Union gamed the UN for votes in the UN? So when the UN was created, it was supposed to be a much bigger, powerful organization. And the United States as a country had one vote, but it had 50 states that are all the size of European countries, right? Well, then you get over to Russia and they're like, well, we've got Russia proper and we don't want one vote. So every time we add a Soviet state in the sphere of the Soviet Empire, rather than call them federal states like the United States does, we'll keep them as independent countries so they get more votes at the UN. So at the height of the Soviet power, they had 20 votes or 27 votes at the UN to the United States as one vote. But during that whole process, right, the Soros Group and USAID and the CIA came into all these satellite states. They sowed discontent. They, underwrote assets, just like what China does with Belt and Road Initiative. Soros Group and USAID and other NGOs were doing the same thing. So then when financial stress came to Russia, they didn't have assets to liquidate and pay. They'd already mortgaged them off, right? And that of course, with the Soros and the CIA, created discontent, and it ultimately led to the downfall of the Soviet Union. That same game plan by those same people that destroyed the Soviet Union, whether you think it's right or wrong, are still in government playing the same playbook, but against the United States. They're peeling off states: Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, New Mexico, New York, Illinois, right? They're making these states be at odds with the federal government, and it creates that distrust, that malcontent. Then people start seeing all the fraud generally. Everybody hates the government, and what ends up being left is these rich NGOs that have tons of cash. They've got access to the cash printers and can buy up assets before the dollar is devalued to nothing, right? It's the same freaking playbook. How do you stop it?
Like, not to go back to the Somalis in Minnesota, but there's so much stuff happening there. You know, the first thing that you should recognize is that basically money's being laundered through a minority community. Okay. So you can get there and you can go hate Somalis and Muslims all you want, but at the end of the day, your focus has to be on the politicians that let it happen on both sides of the aisle. This isn't just a Democrat scam. Republicans had to know this was going on. They had to know. So, there's just failures all across the board. Like I said earlier about, regular audits and social security numbers and, checking insurances and bonds, you know, somehow all that got skipped over for all these billions of dollars, and it's like this is what the United States government has been doing in black communities now since the 70s. They've been laundering money through communities. I can simply look at my community in Baltimore City and look at the money, the billions and billions of dollars that have gone through that community, and you got houses falling on kids that are walking to school. Are you kidding me? It's a disgrace, man. And and then you take that one step further. You understand that when that money gets laundered from our children, by the way, our children are going to have to pay interest on those dollars. Okay, that they never got to touch. That money that they're responsible for didn't benefit their lives. In fact, it's going to fund terrorism. Okay, because that's what Somalis do. They go ahead and they pirate ships, and then how do you prevent that? You put U.S. Navy warships in the region. You know what I mean? It's just a loss. It's more than the money that got stolen, okay? Because when you start funding terrorism and then you have United States intervention, what's the price tag on that? It's way out of control. And that's why not NATO, but yeah, NATO. Right. NATO's a joke. NATO is something to keep us over in Europe, helping to bolster the defense of other countries. We shouldn't be over there. What's the price tag of that? Well, I'll tell you what the price tag is. We're $37 trillion in debt, and nobody's doing anything about it. Even the last appropriations bill that was passed, it added money to the debt. It's a disgrace. And then, it never stops. Here's how corrupt it is. Quick, you talk about the prosecutor in my case. He's a big old liar. Okay, a prosecutor that's working on behalf of the federal government should not go and lie. Okay, they should simply state the facts. This woman was emotionally invested and screwing me over and my family to the umpteenth degree. Okay, so Ashley Akers, before Donald Trump takes office, she quits. Well, you look up where's she at now. She's working for some law firm in Northern Virginia where they're suing the Trump administration about their tariffs, about ICE. It's just lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. So when she took that job, okay, when she was a public servant for the United States taxpayer, okay, she wasn't focused on America. She was focused on furthering her ideology. She's in that group of people. They're a problem, dude. And I don't know how you stop it, but I'll tell you what, if you could call a state of emergency for a heavy rain, you can damn sure call a state of emergency for this. We have been taken over. And those who did it, those who have plundered, they have strip mined the wealth. I look at my kids. I have a house I inherited that I can't sell my son because the mortgage rates are outrageous. Jerome Powell, he can't budget an addition. Seriously, he tried to budget an addition. He's like $1 billion over. How is this guy setting the rates? It's got to be torn down, man. So we'll see what 2026 brings. But I'm telling you, I don't expect anything other than what we've seen so far. More of the same.
Yeah. I was really disappointed when James Comey, when that judge dropped his case. I was like, this is a judicial cartel, right? I was indicted on January 7th, 2021. So it took them all of 24 hours to figure out who I was and bring enough information to a grand jury. And you're telling me, with everything we know, just prima facie, on its face, fraud violations, smurfing violations, civil rights violations left and right. You telling me you can't bottle all that up and take it to a grand jury in a year? You know what I mean? Like it
You got to get
defies belief.
Yeah, you got to get the cases out of DC. I mean, DC is a cesspool. Like the attorney who represented me said, man, DC is a company town, and the business is government. And it shows that you can't, you know, g- what James Comey did by furthering the Russia investigation is that's treason, man. It's treason, and you can't even get his case out of the district court. It's pretty sad. And they use the flimsiest of evidence to hunt us down. And when I want to circle back to the FBI for a minute and just give you an example of how out of touch they are. I remember going to work and looking across the street and seeing the FBI sit across from my house on a couple of occasions before they finally made themselves known. And even then, they would come by sometimes and get a peek. Taylor, it's 2 miles from where the FBI was sitting down the street that Rachel Moran was murdered. by a illegal immigrant, an MS-13 gang member that was stopped at the border and identified as an MS-13 gang member and led into the country. Um, Rachel Moran is one of two women that were murdered in my county. So here's the FBI, billing hours, man. You know what I mean? That's what they're doing. They're sitting there drinking their coffee, hanging out. What a dream job.
Watching
Okay.
you, watching
Look,
you.
if you're the FBI guy, okay, this is the dream. Okay, let's go get these criminals. You don't have to be out at late. You don't have to pee in a water bottle because you're doing surveillance. Man, I'm getting up and I'm out the door at 7 a.m. and I'm going to work. You know where I'm going to be. It's no mystery. Okay, but to just turn a blind eye. Um, and this is at the same time that El Salvador was cracking down on their MS-13 problem. So you got to understand that these MS-13 gang members, they could get out of El Salvador, they were gone. Why not? If you're going to be locked up at CSOT, okay, and held accountable for your crimes, why not just go to the United States?
Then
They'll
get paid to be
identify
here.
you. They'll identify you as a gang member. Come on in. You need some Visa cards, or they let that happen. So, um, like I say, man, I have trouble with the fact that this government is allowing illegal immigrant people into the country that are violent gang members. They're murdering our women. Taylor is the point I'm trying to get to. What more is it going to take for you as an American to get involved? You call yourself a man, and you want to go ahead and tell you they're murdering our women. Let that sink in. Think about the girl from Ukraine, that got her neck sliced, on the subway. Okay, it's too much, man. There needs to be some accountability somewhere at some level, and I don't see where we have any.
Yeah, it feels very one off. It's like you've got systemic fraud, systemic corruption, and we get satisfied with one offs. Right. We get the drug user that gets arrested and they slap a kingpin designation on him and say they took down a kingpin. When we all know that it wasn't a kingpin. That's just a guy in the single wide next door, that was dealing to feed his addiction. And they sell that stuff to us all the time. They act like these guys that they're bringing over from Mexico that have been incarcerated in Mexico for a decade, and they act like it's some win. These guys haven't been running their cartels. They've been behind bars. So whatever they've been doing has been, small potatoes compared to what they did on the outside. It takes us 10 years to get those people transferred. You know what I mean? Like it screams out to me, what you're saying. Like nothing's really going to get done unless we have to see big action, like the behind the scenes stuff. This is an election year, an important one. Are we really gonna wait till the wire to show action? Because that's what the American voter wants, is accountability.
Accountability, again, it's not revenge that I'm looking for. I'm just looking for equal justice. And Donald Trump has control of the government, kind of, I guess. We got you in there, man. Let's see this system work. Let's see how it's supposed to work. Make a believer out of me. I want to believe. I want to believe that we live in a just country where we can write things by simply going out and voting. But your vote doesn't matter. They steal your vote. The fraud is huge. Like Hermie Dillon, she comes out and makes some statements, talking to us like we're the hell. Like how dare you question what I'm saying? I get it. I'm a fan of hers, but don't address me like that. You're in power because of people like right here. We're the one who put you there. And I have questions, and I want answers to them. And you don't have them. I get it. It's hard. She's out there singing the blues about how hard it is. I know exactly how hard it is. Okay, my
What I
L3 to
don't understand,
L4.
what I don't understand, Jocelyn Ballantyne, in charge of this pipe bomber case, that was in charge of the Proud Boys case, that was in charge of General Flynn's case. Really? Really, DOJ? We got the most conservative DOJ ever, says Harmeet Dillon. We're going after this. Then why is she even at the DOJ still? She is one of the coup plotters. She's one of the orchestrators, right? Don't give me I was just doing my job nonsense. You don't just do your job when you slip a piece of paper to Enrique Ontario saying, say the president told you to tell the Proud Boys to storm the Capitol and you won't spend time in jail. How does that serve the American people or truth or justice? There's a lot of things that you go after Enrique Ontario on, right? Aside from J6, I mean, guy definitely doesn't have no skeletons in his closet. Why that? Well, it's because it's only narrative. How is this woman still employed at the DOJ? She should have been top of the list of people to clean out. This is the other thing that blows my mind. Kash Patel. How in the world do you end up with the lead agent on the Mar-Lago raid as your pilot for the private FBI plane? How does that happen? And then just act like you're not aware, but when Kyle Seraphin points it out, all of a sudden that guy finally gets fired? Do you not background check the people around you? Like, is it so infiltrated that there's not people to replace the bad guys that you have to leave them in charge of, marquee prosecutions? Like Maureen Comey. How is it possible that one prosecutor gets the Epstein case, the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and the Diddy case? How is that possible?
And to believe that they were just told to do that. Okay, I was I had this
Can't
conversation.
they get reassigned to parking ticket duty?
Well, I had this conversation last night, with folks that were just, oh my God, you were at J6, or you was, blah 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 blah, and someone made the comment, well, they were just doing as they were told. That's not an excuse. I'm sorry. Again, you want to make an impression, you come, bam, clean house. It doesn't matter. I don't care what you were told. The fact that you follow through with it, hey man, what I do, I've worked for companies that want to, go ahead and cut a corner, or they want to go ahead and leave something. Oh, they'll never see that. I'm not doing that. You can fire me, but I won't be part of that fraud. Sorry. It goes down to the individual level. Like, these individuals need to be held accountable for what they did, and stop saying that someone else told me to do so. That's a loser mentality that's got us exactly where we are.
Yeah. And we're not like the Sedition Six, where we're like, you need to military disobey lawful orders or question everything. No, there's certain things on their face that aren't right. Don't lie. If you're a lawyer and you're working for the United States government, don't lie. The facts. The facts should be good enough, right? I mean, if we're convicting people on facts, why does narrative have to enter into it? I had the same prosecutor for my trial that you had, Ashley Akers. She showed up the day of trial, so she wasn't she wasn't involved with me until the day of, because the lead prosecutor quit/caught COVID right on the morning of trial. And but she was vitriolic, man. She was absolutely vitriolic. You're right. And how you don't clean people like that out. She quit on her own, and then went on TV, of course, and now she's suing the Trump administration left and right, like you said. But there's a lot of other of those prosecutors that were just as vitriolic, that were just as, gung ho to violate people's civil rights, that are still working at the FBI and the DOJ. And I'm not satisfied with this idea. Well, now they're going after Antifa. I roll my eyes because I'm like, I don't trust that you guys know how to identify Antifa, right? Because if you're going to treat everybody Antifa like you treated every person in the Proud Boys, it's like, it's not always fair. And I'm not saying I sympathize with Antifa. I'm just simply saying some of those people are still just normal American citizens that just are caught up in the zeitgeist of the left. So they're sympathetic.
I don't want a federal law enforcement agency that's targeting groups of people based upon the political whims of whoever's in charge, whether it be Donald Trump or Joe. It doesn't matter. The FBI should just simply go where the crimes are at and focus on them, not be targeted. And it just shows you, like, this woman calling my son, 10 months into it, like she's just now getting around to, what has she been doing for the last 10 months? What has she been doing for the last 10 years? I'm sorry, man, but we're so far down this road. You guys are a joke. You'd be better off shutting the FBI down and taking those agents that are good people and just inserting them elsewhere. The FBI is a disgrace. Like
Yep.
just think about when I grew up. You thought about FBI agents, about the prestige and the honor that this person was doing the right thing for America. That's not what how I view the FBI anymore. To me, they're a political organization and they're absolutely corrupted. They will protect the
They've always been
fraud.
that. They've
Yeah, they'll
always been
protect the
that.
fraud.
Yep. There's a post here on our YouTube says the issue of the American people are simple. U.S. citizens only look within the United States. Why? How about you all look at the rest of the world? How the rest of the world is doing? The U.S. has the worst employment conditions of the Western world, yet you all can't see it. You guys need to look outside the world of the U.S. So first of all, grace me 02. I have an international studies minor, so I do look outside the world. And in the show, we do talk quite a bit about international politics and kind of how that plays into things. But when you talk about employment conditions of the Western world, well, yeah, we do have an employment problem in this country, and in my opinion, the vast majority of that employment problem stems from illegal migration. Right? You're in the trades. I was in the trades. You know why wages in the trades haven't gone up for legitimate workers? Because there's an influx of cheap labor that'll come in and work for minimum wage for 4 or 5 years, right? And that takes out your entry level job for your post high school graduate that wants to go learn how to frame houses or do construction. Those jobs aren't available for them until they come back with a construction management degree, and then they end up being project managers over crews of illegal aliens, right? You've seen it. It's a huge problem, and it's every industry, factories, construction, right? All these standard jobs for, we'll call them the low information voters, the sports fans that kind of live in that world. They don't have the opportunities, and a lot of that's illegal migration. And then that falls into housing. Now people can't afford housing, and it just goes, and then there's no pride in the community because nobody owns anything, right? Everybody's a permanent Section 8 renter. That was one of the amazing things, is spending time in the Midwest with the prison, talking to people that were from around the Midwest. You have entire towns that are essentially Section 8 supported. Like, nobody could live there if there wasn't Section 8. And why is
Well,
that? Because the factory got shut down 15 years ago or 20 years ago, just after NAFTA was passed.
that's right. It's such a double whammy. So all the jobs, the blue collar, the factories, they've all shut down. Okay. They've left. And now you have all these other, good paying construction jobs. Taylor, you can't find an American on these jobs. I've been on jobs where there could be, anywhere between 100, 150 people, and there may be four or five, Americans, on the job. That's it. And they speak, I would have to speak Spanish. I would go whole days without saying a word of English at work, because I was dealing with the Spanish guys. Let me say something. I, I enjoy so much working with those Spanish guys, okay? And they'll be the first to tell you about how bad, like they're complaining about the influx of immigrants that it's driving their already depressed wage down. It's just bad, and you can see it like when you go through Baltimore City and you go into these communities, okay? Like the Democrat Party has to separate these people, okay? There are patriotic Latinos, man, that love this country, that recognize the opportunity. They understand awful well that they can't do this at home. They're so love them guys, okay? But they're not the problem, okay? The problem is the guys that come over here and collect welfare and have no plans on working. They'll do day labor only for cash. They're criminals, okay? You have to figure out who's who and deport them. So Donald Trump, this guy didn't commit no crime. It doesn't matter. When they got that massive influx into the community, because like you can get ICE out of like if ICE is in your community, Chicago, and you got a problem with it, it's real simple. Cooperate with ICE. In other words, when you lock up an illegal immigrant and there's a question about his immigration status, you got to let them know. You got to honor detainers. They're not doing anything like that. So you got elected officials in an American city that are openly defying federal law, and there's nothing being done about it. Like, please share with me the plan to hold Governor Pritzker accountable for the crimes he's committing against the citizens of Chicago, or Brandon Williams, or the people in Seattle, They are committing crimes on a mass scale, and nobody's being held accountable. Yet I go to what I thought was going to be a peaceful rally to protest against this crap, and you spared no expense to come after me and my family. And when I hear you talk on your podcast, Taylor, that a friend of yours got debanked, I got to tell you, man, it put a pit in my stomach because I remember what that feels like. Okay. I remember that those banks colluded with each other. Okay. I had some major financial things that were going on that involved a house. Okay. Major stuff going on, right? That I inherited. And it was like all that all that account closure happened at the worst time. They wanted me to foreclose on that house. Now through the power of God, man, I was able to go ahead and win that battle. Yeah, I'm still standing. I still got that house. You want it, come get it the right way. You want you come on down the street and take it from me. Instead of doing what you do. What they did to whoever it is that got the bank. And when I hear about Tennessee, I think they're the only state in this country that has passed a law saying that you cannot debank somebody based upon their political views. That should be a national law. Donald Trump knows this all too well. So this is a double-edged sword, okay? Because how do you circumvent that? Well, you can find other banking institutions that don't care about you. You can do that, or you can go outside the system. I think that that's probably a winning answer. To deal in digital currencies where you can't be debanked. Because that's so much power for those people to have, man, and they'll use it anytime. That debanking's got to stop.
Yeah, and their rationale for debanking wasn't political, but it has okay, right. Anybody who wants to do what you're saying, go independent, get outside the system, leave the matrix, the financial matrix, right? You become a target, and it doesn't matter what your reasoning is, right? So all they did was go to the bank and they wanted to withdraw cash, and they didn't want to disclose the purpose of the cash, right? It's just, I'm withdrawing it for personal use. None of your business. If I want to buy a car for 30 grand, I can buy a car for 30 grand, right? I just need to withdraw cash. Well, that right there was enough for them to get debanked. So in a world where you don't want to disclose where your cash is going, the bank goes, "Oh, you're a security concern for us." Well, why are you a security concern? Well, because the people have been collateralized. All that 37 trillion in national debt, you're a debt slave to it. You have to pay it, which means you got to stay inside the banking system so they can take your money from you.
So,
And they can inflate it away, they can tax it away, they can confiscate it. They
yes.
want you to keep it in the system.
What they would like to do is say, hey, so and so is out of pocket. Let's just go ahead and shut his banking down. Let's go ahead and limit how far he can travel. This is all digital crap. Catherine Austin Fitz is right on the money with this stuff. As crazy as she sounds, man, she's hitting the nail on the head every time.
And
And
she's
she
as mainstream as you get. She worked in an administration, like
yeah, but
recently, like the Bush administration.
well, she's the one that has made me look differently at JD Vance, and any political person, I look at him skeptically, and I need to see serious change because all we're going to have is another 2020 where a bunch of people do a bunch of talking, but when the rubber hits the road, they're cowards. The vast majority of them are cowards. Marsha Blackburn's a coward. Tommy Tuberville. Oh, he sounds so tough now. Okay, he's another coward that wasn't man enough to go ahead and say, they signed those
Can you believe Trump?
representatives.
Can you believe Trump put Kelly Loeffler back into his administration?
What? And then she lost her seat to fraud. Like she
She
wouldn't vote. Like she voted to certify the fraud that took her out of the running for the congressional seat. It just made no sense. It made no sense unless they're in on it. You got to understand they're in on it. Those Republicans are in on it. Like you probably have
the
such
the,
a
the Dominion voting machines just got sold to Liberty, which is now owned by a GOP guy. So yeah, it looks like they're in on it. It looks like the GOP is now going to be the head of the uniparty, with the Democrats being the little controlled opposition. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, it's not a good look, man. I mean, why are we going down this road of machines? Well, now this person owns the machines, and now No, 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 no. You have to have paper ballots, same day voting. Mail-in voting should be on a very limited scale, and there should be a chain of custody that's involved with your mail-in ballot if you got disabilities or whatever. But it has to stop, man. Our election system is completely corrupted. We don't have real elections. And I think if you did have real elections, it would be easy to get somebody in there that just isn't so corrupted by the system, man. I mean, they're just corrupted from top to bottom. And if you are corrupted, you just get absolutely they'll come and demolish you, man. They'll lie about you. They'll just make your life hell. So yeah, I guess that's my message that, we're in no better shape today. I mean, maybe marginally, but the battle is ahead. And I wish that Donald Trump and the mega just somewhere would just get a W. Like we need a W somewhere. Just some red meat. I want some red meat, for the native, man, please. But yeah, I don't. Do you? Where's the red meat, Taylor? You tell me, okay? Because
I don't
you're
know.
an optimistic. You're an optimistic guy. When I hear you talking about these things, I mean, they sound good. Like maybe something's getting better. Why don't you tell me, man? Are we in better shape today than we were? Well, you and I are in better shape, but you know what I mean. But you understand the point I'm making.
I
Are we as
do.
a country in better shape?
I think my definitive answer to that question is yes, we are in better shape. There are structural things that have happened, shifting to tariffs over domestic taxation. That'll take a couple of years, but I think that there's a real possibility the IRS gets reined in, if not eliminated. That's a directional thing. That's a big deal. I think that deporting and making such a big deal of illegal immigration is a big deal. It won't correct itself in Donald Trump's first term, but if the if the deportations can continue for 6 or 7 or 8 years, the world that our kids grow up in or have to work in will be very different than the one we worked in, where we were constantly adding in labor, right? So I think that that'll make a big difference. Getting rid of the transgender stuff broadly, I think will make a big difference. It's going to take an entire generation to work out the transgender stuff because it has embedded itself. People have chopped off their dicks. Parents have destroyed their children's reproductive capacity, and all of that has to be worked through. But if the laws can stay tight, then I think that that's a really good thing. I think Trump has basically put the British banking cartel, which involves Israel and involves the Vatican. I think he's put them in a box that I don't know that they can get out of that box. I think that as far as a controlled demolition of the U.S. Economic system that's based on the London banking system, I think is in the works. I think Trump is going to gather up as much Bitcoin reserves as he can, and then they're going to either revalue it or just take it at whatever value. And I think they'll revalue gold to offset our debt. I think that's a big thing. I do think that we are at the beginning of a new industrial era with AI and robotics. So I think that that's very real. That's like the invention of cars, right? Like if it weren't for the invention of cars, the Federal Reserve IRS system that was established in 1913 wouldn't have been successful. It took a new industry to dump that money into and have normal people want to borrow to buy that asset, a car, which then led to other assets too, right? Because there's a whole industry around automotive and jobs and stuff like that. So I think that there's enough seeds that have been planted that if somebody that has a MAGA agenda stays in power after Trump, that those seeds can become the norm. And then that becomes our turning, right? Our next generation is going to live under a tariff regime, and they're going to live under a law and order regime, and they're going to, a transparency regime. Because I do think the financial system's all going to go crypto, which means everything's going to be trackable. As long as the people can track it, we'll be good, right? If the government is the only one who can track it, well, we may as well just keep the central banking system we have. Except they'll have all the power because they'll be able to track the cash. Whereas right now you can take cash and kind of do what you want with it. So I think that that's a potential problem. I do not like what Palantir is doing, but at the same time, I've always been the one who runs away from fraud industries, right? Once I get behind the curtain and see how it really works, I typically end up finding my way out because it's intolerable for me. So if the system is set up to where fraud really can't happen with federal money or state money, then I'm okay with that, right? But at the same time, how do we maintain our privacy? Now we've got to be really aggressive in like trust solutions and things like that, where you can create entities to work through. But of course, everything has to be transparent, no crime. So I like that stuff, but at the same time, the poison pill in all of it is the deep state, right? If you don't clean out the bad actors, they're just going to take the new tools and the new system and they'll just manipulate it for themselves, right? When your attitude in government is it's government versus the people, which I've seen. I had a health department officer who basically told me that, our job in the government is to make sure the people don't ever get what they want. And as long as that's the attitude, yeah, it'll just be, new rules, new boss, but same as the old.
Right there, man. I think of it, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, and I won't get fooled again. I mean, that's how I feel. You're not going to fool me again. Not only does this stuff need to stop, but there needs to be justice for the people who have committed this theft to this country. You know, I mean, the Clintons, the Bushes, the Cheneys, the Obamas, the Bidens, the McConnells, the John McCain. I mean, he's not going to get much justice out of him. But I mean, these people are absolutely corrupted to the core. They've stolen America's wealth, and they've built these secret empires, for themselves. They live on top their ivory hills, and they look down at us and they sneer at us, like we're just the peasants. So I got to tell you, Taylor, when I got to prison in Washington D.C., it was good to meet you, Matt. The guy next to him. I mean, like it. I'm in prison. I'm expecting this, big super prison people, and I'm meeting, just average American blue collar mom, blue collar fathers, businessmen, intellectual people, college educated people, people that, thought like me, people that I could never imagine committing any violence, that were charged with violent crimes. I mean, like I could just look and see this guy I didn't commit no I knew that, but I'm thinking this guy didn't commit no violence either. It really let me know that I was a political prisoner. I wasn't there, because I did something so heinous. I was there because of how I thought and how I viewed the world. So it was good to you were like a security blanket for me, man, where I could like bounce off like the crazy stuff that was going through my head. And we used to debate back and forth and have just good conversations and idea. It was hard for me to see you get off that bus, man, and get on that plane. That was it hurt. It was like you're like the only friend I got, man, and you're getting on that plane and as you shimmy away and ankle chains. And you know what I mean? And there's MS-13 gang members with tattoos on their face. There's a whole plane of them getting off. I don't know where they were going, but I mean, that was a tough journey. I mean, from there they took me to Lewisburg and I sat in solitary confinement for 18 days. I was with Matt Kroll, to be fair, I was with him for 7 days and he got yanked out. But yeah, you didn't get out. You got out a couple hours sometimes to get to a shower or whatever. But that was it. You had no idea where you were going, when you were going. They would just come and bang on your door at midnight, throw in some crackers or whatever. There's breakfast. Get ready. You're leaving soon. It was a scary time, man. It was, but I don't think I'm any better for it. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not ashamed of what I did. I'm definitely not ashamed of anything I did, man. If anything, it's like I don't know if I'm proud of it or not. I'm sure that some people in the family probably still think I'm nuts, and that's okay. Um, I'm okay with it because I told the truth. I just went there and told the truth. I told my truth as I seen it. The truth is powerful, and I'm willing to suffer for the truth. I don't care what suffrage that I have to endure for simply, telling the truth and pointing out this fraud. I'll continue to do so to the day I die. I owe that to my children. We owe that to our children. You know, and all the other J6ers that are out there arguing with each other, you know, go ahead and argue away, man. Who cares what everybody else thinks? That's between us. I have a link with every one of them. You know, some of them are people that you never want to talk to, some of them are people you gravitate to, but we all have something in common. All those people took action. All those people, you know, they saw the same thing I did and said, I am going to do something. So I see those people out there, and something that really strikes me, you talk about like things like PTSD, like what does that mean? And you know, you saw a lot of those people that were locked up 23 hours a day, that couldn't get haircuts, that couldn't get, you know, toenail clippers, that, you know, were denied basic rights, that were lied to about, hey, take a vaccine, we'll let you see your family. They were spying on their conversations with their attorneys. I gotta say, man, like those people that went through that, they were not forthcoming with those details. You really had to get to know that person for them to open up about that experience. It affected them negatively, you know, in a real serious way. And I see those people out there now that are still struggling. You know, I really feel for them. What happened to them wasn't right. And what separates people like you and I from people like on the left is that the day I see the Trump administration kicking in people's doors and putting laser sights on people's kids, well, I'm gonna go stand next to the person that I can't stand to protest that, because I will not sit by and watch this government treat any other human being like that. That was wrong. There needs to be accountability for what they did. Those men that suffered greatly like that should be made whole, and they're never going to be made whole. That's not happening. Not when you got cowards like Ted Cruz running around. Sorry, he's talking about running for president. You know what I'm saying?
And paying
And so
himself for being spied on by the same people who spied on us.
that's right. So, you know, I don't feel funny about what I did. I'm glad that I went to the Capitol, and you know, I'll go ahead and storm your boat and throw your tea over shore. You know, when it gets too ugly, I don't care, man. What they did was wrong. They're still at it. I hope and pray that the Trump administration has a better 2026 and 2025. I'm appreciative for my pardon. But I don't look at Donald Trump like, you know, like he's the guy that did it. I think that Jesus Christ is the one who set us free. And I think that, you know, there was only so many hundred of us that were affected by it. And the power of prayer, you know, to me is incredible. You had all those people that were collectively praying for the same thing. So, you know, that's probably something that we can explore, you know, moving forward, you know, the power of prayer and all that. And I don't want to take away from what he did to us, but you know, he knew he had to do that because of how, you know, he got a good look under the hood, man, and he knew how ugly it was. When you talk about JD Vance and, oh, you know, this person was violent and that person wasn't, whatever, I think that they purposely caused that confusion, and then they released this immediately because nobody had time to protest, to come to the jail and make it harder on our families. I think they created that confusion purposely. I think he knew day one he was pardoning us.
Trump did, or JD Vance?
And made it look as confusing as possible, just
As a
so no,
misdirect.
as a misdirect. Because
Yeah.
if they had time to gather their forces to protest in front of that jail, Taylor, they would have. These
Oh yeah,
people are
and
hateful.
because they didn't clarify who was going or make a list or anything like that. Yes, there were J6ers that were overtly active on January 6th, right? They were way too uh not a good look, right? And so if but they have the same charges I had, right? You get a 111A and you punch a cop, and you get a 111A like me, you push a gate for 2 seconds, and we have the same charges. And so if they'd have said, okay, we're going to release all the 111A people, they would have come and they would have found somebody that got a 111A that was overtly violent, and they would have compared him to me. You know what I mean? And they would have protested him, but by default, I would have lost out on a pardon for the charge I needed pardon for. Or you had a 111B, which was a deadly weapon assault, right? And it's like not all deadly weapons are the same. You know, there's a big difference from the guy who brings a tomahawk or a hatchet and pulls that thing out versus you ended up picking up a defunct spray gun or whatever. You know, it's like it didn't fire it at anybody. The whole thing,
I-
yeah. I've
it was handed to me, and I never actually sprayed anybody. I just sprayed it, you know. And then it's like, you know, my judge was like, he's asking the same questions you are. He's like, "Is this really a dangerous or deadly weapon?" Like he looked at it skeptically, and then he was like, he went to go find uh, um, uh, the victim reports. You know, what do you call that? The victim impact
the
statements.
impact statements. Yep.
And then he's like, "Hey, there's no official victim listed here. Where's the victim?" Like he was surprised. He's like, "What? Okay, yeah, you know, 46 months." You know, like he's looking at it, recognizing how flimsy this indictment is. My attorney's done cashed it in, man. You know, he had done got his ass kicked for 5 months at the Proud Boys trial. And I mean, no disrespect to him, man. You know, he was just wore down by it all. You know, and he knew it didn't matter what he said, they were going to convict me of this, like it or not. You're going to jail. And that's exactly what happened, man. You know, so anyway, here I sit.
I so for everybody, I got into the J6 pod a little bit before Doug, and when Doug came in, I will never forget that first day that you came in. You were so hot. You just got out of solitary, and you were just like, "I hate everybody, and I hate my prosecutor, and I hate everything." And I was like, "Man, you could feel the temperature on you." So gave you a couple days, but eventually we got to be walking buddies, and we walked. How many miles do you think we walked? 100 miles together inside that pod, back and forth.
Looking down, like I know we were doing 5, 6 miles a day at a minimum. You know, inside that, you know, it's like we had the time to count up the 1 foot squares, and we understood the math equation. You had to walk back and forth so many times for to equal a mile, and that's how we spent our days, man. I mean, just walking back and forth and looking at the news, and boy, it was so uncertain. And yeah, I was mad. I was mad because I was naive. I was naive to think that, you know, this is America. Yeah, I have rights, and at some point this ship is going to be righted. And it never did, man. It never did. They just absolutely sold us down the river. They were willing to go ahead and ruin our lives for exposing their fraud. You know, it made me mad. And then at some point I understood that, you know, I hadn't felt the Holy Spirit touch me in some time. And I knew that it was because of my anger. You know, God wasn't going to come and console me. With that, that's not who God is, man. So I had to really calm my mind and calm myself, and I had to really fall into prayer and scripture. And God, Taylor, what a benefit it was to having supporters on the outside that were mailing Bibles in there. You know, when I was in solitary confinement with John, man, God bless him. You know what I mean? Hey, man, I love that guy. You know what I'm
I,
saying?
I ended
That
up
was
I ended up with him in Missouri.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
ended, we ended up
just a
moving
good
together.
human, another good human that I met along the way, that whose life was being destroyed. But you know, the thing was, man, you know, we could walk through there and study scripture and debate on things and see how that related to the Constitution and just how important these words were. You know, I got a much greater understanding of, you know, those documents, that Bible, that Constitution, what they mean to each other, you know, you know, and it's just, I gotta say, you know, I thought the government was corrupt before I educated myself on just how corrupt they are. You know, it's worse than I ever thought, and it's all right there. But you know, the thing was, I had to calm myself down. That's where I was at. I had to calm myself down, man, to really, you know, let God come back in and start talking to me, start calming me down, and you know, my family just did a lot of prayer. It was a hard time. It was a hard time for my wife. Like it was a hard time for your wife, you know. But you know, not only was my wife's husband, and you know, but you know, her son too, you know, his newborn. You know what I'm saying? It's like it was just very difficult time for this family. But you know, here we are, man, you know, unafraid. You know, I
Yeah.
stand before you unafraid.
Yeah. I remember. So Doug and I went from DC, and I wanted to stay in DC a little longer because you were with J6ers and we could call home quite a bit. And I remember the night they came in to transfer, they have to take your temperature. It was still under COVID protocols. And they came in to get Doug and I to take our temperatures. And Doug, you were like, Taylor, we're going to prison. You were so excited to get out of the
Yeah.
pod. And then we ended up in Philadelphia together for about 3 weeks. And you were like, this is hell on earth. What was I thinking?
Dude, I couldn't believe the way that jail was, man. I mean, it was like it was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Okay, violence was happening every day. You know, they would actually like you didn't have to get jumped. Like they would actually go into rooms and fight out and settle their street beefs. I mean, this is insane. Dude, I remember when I would get locked into the cell that the guy next to me was sharpening his shank. I could actually hear that through the wall. You knew he was sharpening his shank. That's what he was up to. I mean, this is that's a bad place, man. That's a very dangerous place for sure. I'll tell you what, Taylor, we kept it real, didn't we?
Yeah,
You know, we did the same thing there we were doing in DC. We just went out into the midst
we
of that
walked.
chaos, man, and we walked and we talked. And I'll tell you what, everybody in that pod saw us. We were an instant attraction. They were like, "What?" We had them watching Fox News. Remember?
We did. We had him flipping on Fox News instead of CNN. We're like, we're tired of this trash. Do you
Because they
remember when? Do you remember when it was CNN that was on and they were showing Joe Biden with the transgender day and all the transgenders and gays at the White House, and all the black guys saw that and they were like, "What the is that? What the?" They were like freaking out at Joe Biden, who most of them supported and had voted for, right? That had transgenders in the White House because that community just rejects that, like, wholeheartedly. And they were, it was like the first time they ever became aware that the Democrats supported the transgender movement.
Right, so they probably take us, you know, and throw us in this, you know, miserable hellhole. Okay, for instance, you remember being in DC and go to church, you know, and it's all black guys, you know, black, you know, city residents, these people that are supposed to hate me, and they all line up against the wall to shake our hands as we walked out of that church service. Or and you know, we went to Philadelphia and you know, hey Taylor, man, you know, can I get some FaceTime with you? People would come to me to try to get FaceTime with you. Hey man, can you arrange something with your guy? You know, I got this legal issue or I got this, it was like, I mean, that was just my experience, man, is that these people that you want to hate me, uh, they supported me, man. Those people watched out for me in
Yeah,
prison. Those
they
guys that
did.
I traveled with from Lewisburg out to Connecticut, you know, it's two black Muslim guys, man. They were telling me what to watch out for. Hey, be careful about this. Be careful about that. When you get there, they're going to want to do this. You know, that was my experience, man. It was I don't ever want to go back, but you know, I got a lot of
Just
respect for them guys. I do. I mean, a lot
to
of them guys
reminisce.
that this is how they made their living, man. They were out there doing the only thing that you know to pay the bills. What are they going to do? What are they going to do in their inner
So
cities? They're going to go get a
yeah,
construction job and you make the ends meet? Nah.
they get right back out and get involved in the same thing almost. The I want. Do you remember the little race riot we saw in Philadelphia? So I came up the stairs because you were already walking. I came off the computers, came up the stairs, and so it's a two-tier block, right? You got your bottom tier. It was kind of a triangular shape, and then you had your top tier, and we would walk around the top tier. And I walked up the stairs to join you walking, and we looked down at the all the tables and where everybody's at, and most people are standing up. Nobody's sitting at the tables. It's really quiet, and I'm like, Doug, something's about to go down. Something's not wrong. Do you remember that?
So Taylor's out of his mind, man. I remember you saying that. I'm like, man, this dude don't know what he's talking about. And it was like, boom, it just popped off. And it got real crazy real fast. And I mean, you got to figure you got groups. It was blacks and Latinos, man, that were fighting, and there was weapons involved. And there's one guard. You know, there's no chance. Yeah, those people got off each other because they wanted to get off. It wasn't like that guard stopped
It
anything.
wasn't because the guards pulled him off. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember where I was at. I had this eagle eyes view of the violence. And then I was like, it just kept getting worse, the violence. And I'm thinking, better get back to my room. And when I got back to my room, I remember Mr. Epps, the old guy that I was bunking with. He's like, "Man, where were you at?" I said, "Man, I had a good view from up top there." He said, "Look, man, if anything, you get back to your room immediately. Don't stand there and look. You don't know what's going to happen." But yeah, the place was full. We were locked in that room for a couple days after that. We were
Yep.
locked in.
Yep. And that's when they started sending the goon squad into the individual cells to pull people out. Do you remember that? And that was pretty intense. Every time they'd come in the cell, you'd be like, who are they going to bash in this time?
Remember at night watching the mice, man, scurry all over the floor and, arguing with
Hundreds,
my.
hundreds of mice.
Yeah, man. Like, that's why everybody, remember they stuffed stuff under the door, man, so where the mice couldn't come in. You know what I'm saying? And like, I remember like Mr. Epps, he was another guy that was, interesting character. But to this, yeah, I might have to Google search this when I get off the phone, but I don't believe that those mice turned to rats. Mr. Epps had said, "Look,
No,
man,
no, he was
he's
dead wrong on that.
yeah," he said, "The
He said they
bigger
were
the
baby
mice get."
rats.
That's what his claim was. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, I don't know about that, Mr. Epps. But what a miserable hellhole that place. I couldn't get out of there quick enough. I remember telling you, I said, Taylor, I was so excited to get out of DC and go to prison because I thought prison was better than DC, to be fair. But Philadelphia was the price you had to pay to get there, and it was hell. And I remember looking at you, I said, Taylor, if I could tell them guys in DC just how bad it is in Philadelphia, I wouldn't. I wouldn't say anything to them because, well, you don't need to fear this. This is bad. You don't need to know about this.
Just come and experience it. It was
Just
rough.
come and
It was
experience
rough.
it. There's no reason to have that type of foreboding.
Uh, my cellmate, the spy, the Russian spy.
Yeah.
So he ended up getting 10 years. And he must have taken a plea deal right after we left. I'm sure his attorneys, who he'd only met with 3 times in 3 years, were like, listen, you got to take a plea deal. So he took a plea deal. But 10 years to be a Russian spy that wasn't. I mean, if there was anybody that you could point to and say that guy's not a Russian spy, it was that guy.
Learned about it's not just us that the federal system is stacked against. You know, when you get your papers in prison, that's a big deal. Everybody wants to read your papers. Who are you, right? And I remember them guys being surprised at the same thing that I was in there for assault and there's like no victim. And that's when they started talking about ghost guns, ghost drugs, and things like that. Like when they would actually, if they have a target and they want to go ahead and take this person down because you suspect a drug dealer, and then they go ahead and perform the raid and find no drugs, well, they'll charge you with the drugs that they think you had without actually having. Not only will they charge you for them, they'll convict you and put you in jail. Now, I'm not saying that that person and that guy wasn't even out saying that, oh, it wasn't me. He was never saying that. He was simply making the point that he had been charged and convicted for having possession of drugs that, like, where are the drugs? Now,
That
now,
that was
now,
a that was I would ask drug dealers that all the time, right? They'd tell me about their case, and they'd be like, the cop planted drugs, or I didn't have drugs in my house because I kept them somewhere else, but they said they were in my house, and I was like, so they were convicted on false facts, right? They were convicted by violation of civil rights, due process, Fourth Amendment search and seizures, planting evidence, all kinds of stuff, but they were drug dealers, right? So it's not that they weren't drug dealers or weren't involved. It's just they weren't guilty of what they were charged with. But the prosecution didn't care because in their mind, oh, we just put away a drug dealer. And the American public's like, yep, bad guys go to jail. Well, having been through the system, I don't want a system that can fabricate charges because you never know when it's coming for you.
old fashioned, but if you're going to convict somebody of like possessing something illegal, like you should have that in your hands when you go to court to convict that person. Then people say, oh, the government has this 90% conviction rate, and they get solid cases. I say, not so much. They get the conviction rate because they have rigged the system to where they can't lose. So they,
From the
they get
grand
these
jury,
cushy government. They get these cushy government jobs and they go out and get these stellar conviction rates. That gives it the appearance that they're a great prosecutor, lawyer, attorney, law enforcement agent, whatever. The whole system is it's it's bad from top to bottom, man. It's bad.
I just watched a documentary on drug dealing in Arkansas, and this documentary crew followed around users, dealers, the cartel, and the cops. So it had cameras in all these places. Maybe they didn't follow the cartel around; they were there for a cartel arrest, but they arrested 49 people in this little Arkansas county. So pretty rural county. They arrest 49 people who are all local residents, grew up in the area. The DEA officers, like, he's lived in the community for 25 years. He's also the town mayor. He's like, I've had family arrested. I've had family die from overdose. Like, this is just destroying our county. There are no jobs in that county, right? It's just destroying that county. And they arrest 49 local community members, and they end up getting one cartel guy who's dropping off the drugs, right, for the local guys to distribute. And when they interview the cartel guy, they show the interrogation, and the guy's like, yeah, if I talk to you guys, I'll be killed within a couple days. They've got people everywhere. I'm not going to talk, call my attorney. And of course, it's a cartel attorney. So that guy probably goes and gets like 5 years. Which, one of the things, did you ever talk to a lot of cartel guys while you were in prison? So a lot of those,
Those guys. I mean, you had the Italians who, there were some hitmen there. There were people that were doing business, but even though they were white, I mean, technically they'd be like, good paperwork white people, right? But they didn't sit with good paperwork white people. They sat with the Italians. You know what I mean? So they would have been kind of like the mafiosos, I guess. But yeah, I mean, like even the drug dealers, the guy that was shipping drugs. I mean, we really didn't. I didn't want to know
I,
the details, man. You
I,
know what I
I
mean?
was, I was in a Pisces yard. So my yard was a Hispanic yard, right? And so we had a lot of Tren de Agua there. We had MS-13. We had Mexican Black Hands. We had a bunch of these, Hispanic cartel guys. A lot of those guys that were traffickers, like mules humping across the border, most of them were there for reentry charges. Even though they were humping drugs, they only got the reentry charge, 1 year and a day in prison kind of thing, and then shipped back to your country. They viewed it like a foreign deployment. Their allegiance was to the cartel, to the gang. It wasn't to their country of origin. It wasn't to the United States, clearly. And they viewed what they were doing for work no different than a private that goes overseas for 18 months. To them, going to prison was just part of their deployment. It was like built into the plan. And their family, as long as they were good and didn't get in trouble and didn't snitch, their family would still get paid a paycheck back home while they were in prison. So they just viewed it as cost of doing business. It's just like a deployment. They didn't view it as, a big deal. They were already away from their family, and they just get into the prisons, and it's just, the same cartel people, same command and control structure. It consolidates a little bit in prison because the cartels work with each other through the prisons, but they'll just start dealing drugs in the prison. They'll get into nonsense in the prison, and they just don't care. They
Right.
just,
So,
you know
so
what
where
I
I
mean?
was at, they called it a dropout yard, where there was no gang affiliations there. Like maybe you were once in a gang and now you're not in a gang. And to be fair, man, like Danbury, it just, I guess it's as good as a prison can possibly get, and that, the drug dealers that were in there, these weren't stupid people. These weren't stupid people. These were intelligent people. They understood, and Steve Bannon understood that too. I remember him having conversations with these guys, and they would talk about how the economy would affect the price of the drugs, of certain drugs from different countries and this and that. And these guys that are doing 20 years, man, they would talk intelligently about it. And Steve Bannon understood that. He understood the global economic value of these drugs that are being shipped all over the world. So these weren't stupid people. But I'll tell you this much: in the prison I was at, it was the Latinos that handled all of the packages would get thrown over the fence. Somebody would have to go and pick them up. This was all done by Latinos. And, because I was out in the tree. You want to talk about walking? When I was in Connecticut, my friend, I could get up and boom. You open the doors, I'm right out in the track. I would do my record was 19.5 miles. That's the most I've ever done in a day. You know what I mean? I saved that last half mile because I wanted it to be special when I did 20 miles. But yeah, I could walk that in a day. I would just walk around, walk around, walk around. But I would see everything out there. And so you would see guys. I remember the first time that I was out there walking and I saw these packages like, maybe like a kind of package that a cell phone would come in or something, but they were wrapped like the same color as the grass. And I remember looking, thinking, "Oh, that's interesting. They must be having a scavenger hunt." Like I swear to God, this is what I
You
thought. I
were
thought, "Oh,
so naive. You were so
I
naive.
was so naive. I honestly thought I was like, oh, there's another one over there. Oh, that's kind of cool. You know what I mean? And then like I started realizing that it wasn't a scavenger hunt, man. This is how they're getting drugs and phones, in there. But I saw one of the guys pick them up one day, and I gotta say, I respected his game because this guy was so quiet, never said anything. He would like blend into the walls. Like they have such they're professionals at committing crimes, man, and they can keep their mouth shut. When they get in trouble, no, no, they just went and did their time in the hole, man. You know what I mean?
Nobody
That's
talks.
nobody talked. And then the way the Latinos lived, like if you came in there and you were complete broke and had nothing, as long as you're in there for a real crime other than a sexual offense, boom, they accept you into their community. Maybe because you don't have nothing, you're the one who has to go work at the cafeteria. So you can go ahead and smuggle out the
Smuggle food.
chickens and but they work together. They kept within themselves. That's the way it was in the prison I was at. But nah, man, it wasn't a scavenger hunt, man. That was some smuggling going on.
Do you remember when your roommate? You remember when your roommate stole your phone pin number and used your minutes, and then he got caught with drugs in the room or drug paraphernalia, and you got a shot for it? And do you remember
Yes.
when we got to that Philadelphia, right? Like certain elements of the block, both on the Hispanic side and the black side, kind of embraced us because we were one of like 6 or 8 white guys in the pod, and we were notorious because we were J6ers, right? And so we made a lot of like friends, and I wouldn't go so far as to call them friends, but we had some connections and some guys watching out for us. And I remember when your number got stolen, and then you got a shot, and you were looking around like, I don't understand. All these people are so nice. I was like, Doug, look out over here. These are all criminals. These are all con men. And what's the first thing a con man does? He gets you to trust them.
I don't know Raul Salamani. It was Quan. Quan said, Doug, because it was my turn to get on the phone, and I couldn't get on the phone because apparently I just got off the phone. I'm like, Quan, man, something's wrong here. He immediately understood what was going on. He stopped that phone line and he walked on over to the computer, made me log in, check here. Boom, there's this name, Raul, some Middle Eastern name. He knew right away who the culprit was. Then it was the next day. I remember that him and that other big dude sat him down and they started slapping him up. Bam, slapping him right in the face. And I said, Taylor, man, I can't I don't want them committing violence in my name. And you said, Doug, stay out of it. You don't know what's been going. This might be the straw that broke the camel's back. He said, just stay out of it. I said, man, that's some good advice there, Taylor.
don't get involved with prison politics. Might be good advice for the U.S. government. Don't get involved in their business, man. Like, let them do their thing. There were many times where I had to just my principles and my opinions right now don't matter. They're going to clean up their mess. They police themselves from within. Don't go snitching to the guards. I just had to sit back and just let the system work itself out.
Right. It's those things that like a lot of guys in prison because of why I was there, man. They just looked out for me. Hey man, don't like when I first got to Danbury, I'd see the guards and I'd be like, hey, good afternoon. And I remember guys said, hey, look, man, pro tip, don't say good afternoon to the prison guards. You know what I mean? Just don't talk to them at all. And I'm like, you get it. When somebody says like, ah. I get it. You know, when somebody's doing something stupid and they're high in the dorm, don't stand there, kind of look, don't, you put your head down, you mind your own business. All that stuff, I had to be taught that. I didn't understand that. But, I wasn't ever in fear. Those guys looked out for me. They had respect. They loved Donald Trump. Even the Latinos, they had much respect for Donald Trump. And it's the black folks that were from New York, especially. They loved them some Donald Trump. They're huge Donald Trump fans. They knew, like, I was worried that I wasn't going to get a pardon. And they knew. They're like, dude, pack your bags. He says you're going home once, you're going home. He's a man of his word. They knew I was going home. They were cheering for me on January 20th at 7:30. I'm just trying to work out, man. This is my slot. I worked out with all black guys too, man. I call them the soul train. You know what I mean? That's we were good friends, man. I mean, I was friends with them. You know what I mean? Absolutely. But to be in there and have other guys from my dorm rush in, they're like, "Yo, Doug E, you're going home." I said, man, I ain't going home tonight. And this is my workout slot. They said, no, 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 you're going home tonight. Drag me out of the weight room. Force me to go into a cafeteria. And boom, everybody knows who I am. They're they're like, you're going home, you're going home. They were happy, man. They were happy that somebody beat their corrupt system. They were happy to see us walk out of that prison. I'll tell you what, the administrators weren't happy. They were off that day. I'm pretty sure it was MLK Day,
Yep,
if I
yep.
remember correctly. They had to come back into the prison, right? And join in that, long weekend, long holiday weekend. They had to get up, get dressed, drive into the prison, and process us out. And they weren't happy about it. The administrators weren't happy about it. The three guards, they were cool, man. They were like, "Oh, you're going home, yeah, yeah. And here's a Visa card. Here's all your money."
Yeah.
I got kicked out of prison. We couldn't get us out of there quick enough. Like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah, we got out at about 11:30 at night, and it was MLK Day, so there's no work in prisons, federal holiday, right? So we basically camped out in the TV room and just watched the inauguration events all day long, and kept waiting for a pardon, kept waiting. Trump would go sign stuff, and finally, when he did at night, John, right, who by the end I was able to room with him. So he was in my room, and he'd gone to bed because he's like, I can't watch it anymore. It's too stressful. And so he went back to the room and was taking a nap. He did that all the time. That was his way to escape, was just go take a nap. And I walked into the room, and we had a broken window, so our room was like frigid cold. And I had my jacket, and I threw it at him. I'm like, "Get up! We're going home! We're going home! We just got pardoned!" And he was so excited. And yeah, we packed our stuff, and they came and got us. It came in a little later and just let us know that we'd been pardoned, and they had to get us out that night. And they were calling people back in, the case managers and stuff, to process the paperwork. But yeah, when we left, it was we left the pod or the block at about 11, and everybody came out of their rooms and they were clapping and cheering and Trump, 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 that kind of thing. They were really excited to see us go. And I don't know about you, but I had a lot of inmates say, go out and make a difference. Talk about this stuff, talk about it. And it's one of the big things that drives me is I remember a lot of those guys in there, they're without advocacy. And there's only so much you can do. You can't go petition for a pardon for every drug dealer we met that we thought was a cool guy or whatever. But at the same time, bringing awareness to just how the government operates, that, we have this illusion that the government is about justice and fairness and equality under the law. And when you get down into the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of it, it's just not that at all. I realized in prison, Back the Blue isn't about us, the people, backing our first responders. It's about cops backing up other cops. How many times did you see one prison guard cover up for another prison guard's screw ups? Saw it all the time. And they would say, well, we have to back the blue. Like, that's why I remember one time we were on lockdown because some guard, literally, she lost her composure, and basically, I don't know how else to explain it. She made a fool out of herself, and it was nothing punishable. There was nothing that any inmate did. She just, came to work having a bad day. We ended up on lockdown because she locked us down in this little fit, and we stayed on lockdown. And the other guards were like, yeah, it probably shouldn't be on lockdown, but we have to back the blue. We have to back her. was like, how many times does that happen at your county commissioner, right? Where that one county commissioner commits some kind of overt fraud, but this county commissioner sitting here has got a little bit of fraud. So they end up covering for the big fraud. You know what I mean? And it's like, when you see the logic of how the system works and how it locks in to protect itself, it's no surprise that the Trump administration is running into problems. But the only solution to it is mass awareness.
Well,
That's one of the things I've realized in coming out of prison and being so close to the news cycle this year with the podcast is facts do not win wars, narratives do. And so a lot of what I feel like we're waiting for is, we know the facts. Like, as a January 6er, we've known about the 2020 election. I haven't learned anything new in 5 years. Right? It's like same old song, same old problem. Sidney Powell got on TV and said the problem is in Venezuela with the servers, and it's the same story. Serbia, it's like the same story. The facts don't win, it's the narrative, right? And watching Donald Trump, he has to fix some real systemic problems this year, and then it comes down to, okay, we've got the facts, how can you release them and get a narrative to where 51% of the country now wants accountability, and the right kind of accountability? Does that make sense? So I wonder, election, J6, it's going to kind of go, Russiagate, election, J6, it's going to go in a sequential order of quote unquote exposure to try to change the narrative. My concern is they're just running out of time.
Well, like I said before, how about some red meat for the natives? I mean, why don't we send the U.S. Marshals into Colorado and rescue Tina Peters? Like the crimes that you're alleging are huge. You know what I mean? They're government overthrowing crimes that you're alleging, and you can't send in a military officer and lock somebody up or rescue Tina Peters. There's just no accountability, man. Those people who are committing the greatest crimes, they are enriching themselves by doing so. Nobody's been held accountable. I have no confidence that anything's going to happen. You and I differ. I say burn it down. You say march forward. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I just don't know. My concern is there's no conservative plan. There's no plan coming out of the Republicans on how to rule the ashes. But the Democrats have a plan on how to rule the ashes. So if we're going to burn it down to ashes, we should have a plan. And that's my concern, is everybody will unite around burning it down. And then the only people that are going to have a plan are the Bolsheviks, because they've done this before. When have conservatives ever overthrown a government and come out better on the other end? Ever. But they get enlisted to be the foot soldiers. The Bolsheviks did it in Russia. They did it in Chile. They did it in Indonesia, right? They get the conservatives who want to maintain their, quote, way of life to go fight to burn down the system. But then they're not ready to storm the Capitol and take over the levers of power when it's all said and done, because they want to retreat back into, nothingness. This happened in the Revolution. There was a big time gap between the King of England saying, okay, colonies, you're on your own, and the creation of the Constitution, right? There was a gap of time there where every governor thought they could just rule the ashes, and it wasn't going to work out for the colonies, right? They had to federalize. There was a real need to do that. And unfortunately, who ended up taking power? The progressives of the time. And they used names like George Washington and John Adams, a lot of these founding fathers that were still around, guys that signed the Declaration of Independence. They got them to buy in to create the Constitution. If George Washington, the ultimate American conservative, who by the way had a huge streak of progressive, being progressive, if he had not sat at the Constitutional Convention, that thing would have never got off the ground. Right. So we were lucky to get what we got, because otherwise we'd have just had tyranny 2.0. Instead of having one king, we'd have had 13 kings. So, I mean, it's pretty rare. So that's my concern, right? Is that if you burn it down, somebody's got to deal with those guys I was in prison with that will eat your face, right? Somebody's got to deal with the shenanigans that just happen out there. And so I'm concerned. I'm really concerned. I'm concerned. I'm concerned that they won't get enough done. Right. But I'm also concerned that if they go too fast, Tina Peters, why don't they just send the marshals or the U.S. military to free Tina Peters? Because that act would be the federal government, that would be considered like, it would be in the category of posse comitatus, right? That is crossing the Rubicon. Once you do that and you violate state sovereignty, you now have to go all the way to the end. You have the Lincoln problem. As soon as you declare martial law, as soon as you go destroy printing presses, as soon as you ignore a Supreme Court decision, now you got to win. Now you have to go scorched earth and go all the way, because now the system is officially done, right? Once you pierce those sovereign lines, you have to win. And that's, I think, where Donald Trump, I don't know if he wants to do that. I think that that's in the cards. The Supreme Court just set it up with the Insurrection Act, because you're going to have to declare an insurrection to enforce the law at every level. You want to fix Minnesota's social safety stuff, California, New York, Illinois, probably have to declare insurrection. If you want to quell violence on the street, you're going to have to declare insurrection. Once you declare insurrection, he'll go take Tina Peters, or he'll go take Tina Peters and then have to declare insurrection. But it's like, that move is one in a handful of moves that would be like the official start of the quote civil war, because right now we have a cold civil war. It happens in the voting machines. It happens with election engineering. It happens with lawfare, but it's all kind of happening in the arena, so to speak. But the moment you leave the field of play and you play a different game, like violate state sovereignty, you have to win. Right? You have to win. And the options on the table include things like suspending the 2026 election because the election software is not secure. Or, you start going into these massive things that have to happen where if you don't have 51% of the country with you, you're going to lose. You know what I mean? Because the facts aren't going to win. It's the narrative that's going to win. The facts have always been against the FBI. Like, the FBI should have never existed. They can't get a law enforcement charter. So the facts are against the FBI, but the narrative that they're the good guys out stopping kidnapping, and the narrative that they're out stopping, terrorism, that is what keeps them in power. It's not the facts. The facts are always against the FBI. They started by poisoning Americans in order to create a legitimacy for the need of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Right? In the 1970s, they couldn't get a charter to be a law enforcement agency, which is why they're little stepbrothers of the DOJ. But the narrative that we need them, that is what propels it forward. It's the same thing with the United States. As long as there's a narrative that we need them, then we're going to support it. And if Donald Trump breaks those barriers, where's the narrative at? Do we need the federal government, or would we rather keep our state governments? Do we, it creates a dividing line that I just don't know that Trump's ready to cross, which is why Tina Peters sitting in prison.
Butts kicked because they're trying to operate in a system that is corrupted to the core, dude. It's horrible. Like if you expose the wrong person at the wrong time, you'll get killed. Like the whole thing with the Tim Walls.
Well, here's this. You just said that. Let's play this. I've been wanting to play this with you. This is Tim Burkhart talking about the Pentagon. So Carlitz, who's one of my regular listeners in the chat, he says the military is the only way. Here's the problem with depending on the military.
You have a Pentagon that has billions of dollars that they hide. We don't ask for any accounting of. They never pass an audit in the history of audits. I've often said the only way we're really going to get to the bottom of this is somebody's going to walk out of one of these labs with this information and puts it out on the internet before they commit suicide by shooting themselves in the back of the head 5 times.
So if the military is the only way, but the military is part of this deep state corruption, if not arguably the worst, because they're the least accountable, right? And we've got people who've passed through the military, like General Milley, right, who basically committed treason by telling China, don't worry, I'll stop Donald Trump, right? I don't know that you can necessarily count on the military either, which is why, in my mind, it always comes back to we the people. The narrative has to be on the people's side. The people have to believe in overwhelming fraud, and the people have to empower Donald Trump to take overwhelming action. Without that, right, the system will protect itself. But we, the people, have to be the solution, because any individual whistleblower within the apparatus, even if an entire, division of the Pentagon decided to turn clean and, disclose things and name names, they'd be dead in the morning. That's my fear.
So, we'll see where that goes. So, there's a couple things that I wanted to just say to you before I hop off here. One is when we got pardoned, there's some people who didn't get pardoned. They got their sentences commuted. Those are Proud Boys, okay? Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, I think. And there's supposed to be this ongoing investigation. I'd like to see the results of that ongoing investigation. I want to know, did those guys go there with the intent of taking over? What happened? I mean, I know what you're alleging. I know what you convicted him of, but what's the whole story? Are we ever going to get the whole story? Because the way I see it is you got military veterans that have been stripped of their benefits, that has spent a bunch of time in jail, and either they're owed a pardon and the back pay that was stolen from them, or they really did what they've been accused of. I'd like to know. And how do you get down to the bottom of it when whatever her name is, Jocelyn, is that the woman's
Jocelyn
name?
ba- Jocelyn Ballantyne.
How do you get an honest answer from her? You can't. Who's investigating what she did? So I want to know what happened. And if, like Joe Biggs, I don't know Joe Biggs. I never met Joe Biggs. But what I do know is that he's a Purple Heart recipient who's gone to foreign wars and had to kill people. That's what he went there for on behalf of this government that threw him in jail, took his kid away from him. So I want to know, did Joe Biggs and Enrique Otario and Dom, did they go there with the intent on taking over the government with no weapons? I mean, is that what happened? Where's the answers at? This thing isn't going away from me. And like I said, if you're the guy who certified that election in 2020, to me, you're trash forever. Period. Don't care, Tommy Tuberville. You sound tough now, but I know where you were when it mattered the most. You're a coward, a yellow belly coward, just like John Thune and Tom Tillis. They're cowards, Taylor. I can't stand them. So you're right. We, the people, do have the power, and it's time to start flexing it somehow, some way. I don't know what the answer is, but I'll be there on January 6th this year to start asking them questions. Another thing I want to do is I've had a lot of time to think about Jake Lang. Okay. Jake Lang has been he put money in I'm pretty sure that was his, they were putting money in our account, man. I got money every month if I wanted it or not, like $115. And I'm appreciative of that. You know what I mean? So if he was involved in that, great. Thanks, Jake. Okay. But let me say this, man. When you go to Minnesota and you're burning Korans and cooking bacon and walking around with pigs and you're doing it in the name of Jesus, you lost me, brother. You know what I'm saying? Because Jesus Christ ain't going to come back and start. They talk about this in our church all the time. They're very, they'll talk about the sin of the transgender and the homosexuality and this and that, but they make sure that you understand that if you are trying to bring these people to Christ, you don't do that with hate and vitriol. Now, if Jake Lang wanted to be the Christian that he claims to be, he'd have run up there to Minnesota and been passing out more than a carpenter of the New Testament and preaching to these Somalians the power of Christ before they get deported. Okay? I have a problem with what he did. And I have a real problem with the fact that he did it in our name because he makes us all look bad. Okay. I'm not going to be part of that. I'm not going to go out and do anything violent or go hating on anybody, but just the same, I want some justice. I want my civil rights. I like to be made whole again. I want some answers. Don't see him coming out yet. So, we'll see what happens. And I just want to ask you, man, like, if you do remember this, one more prison story. Okay. This is it. One more prison story. But I remember I got to Philadelphia, everybody had a nickname. Remember that? And I was like, man, I like a nickname. I said, Taylor, I'm gonna talk to somebody about this. I went and talked to Max. Remember Max? I said, Max,
Yeah.
man. I said, why don't we have nicknames? He said, you do have nicknames. I said, really? What is it? Well, you're Doug, so you're just Dougie. That's your nickname. He said, how about my man? How about my man Taylor? and they were calling you Stormy.
Yep.
It's like Stormy. I mean, you mean like Stormy Daniels? And he's like, no, like Stormy the Capitol.
Yeah, I got the nickname Stormy.
Oh man.
Uh, when I got to Missouri, it just was TJ6 because I put that on like my water bottle and stuff. So I just became TJ6. That's funny. Yeah, I remember
You,
that Stormy.
yeah.
That Max
Are
guy,
you?
he was a diehard Democrat,
Yeah.
but he couldn't defend anything the Democrats are doing. But he just was absolutely certain the Republicans weren't the answer.
But once again, even him as a Democrat, man, he definitely showed us respect, man. You know, the
Yeah.
important thing to do in prison was like if you believed in whatever it was, then you better stand on that. And them guys would come and test me all the time. You know, boom, how about this? How about this? And you know, you just had to stand on what you believed in, and you know, you got respect. We got respect. You know, absolutely. And my son tells a story, like he ended up doing time with one of the guys who was in Philadelphia with us, and said, oh, that's your dad? Yeah, they used to walk all the time. You know, like obviously
Wasn't
we
wasn't he the one who said he didn't want to talk to us? He was only there for a little bit, and he's like, "Aren't they racist?" Something like that.
I want to say that, but that's what he said. Like he was questioning if we were racist. You know, obviously we're not racist, you know what I mean? But you know, it's like they oh, he's white, he's a Trump supporter. Like, you know, they want those folks to believe that. You know, those folks that rally against us. Are you going to go to the Capitol on January the 6th?
I don't think so. I
Yeah, I have.
everybody in my life tells me I shouldn't go. Like every single
Why?
person, it's another setup. You don't want to be in DC. Just make yourself a target. You're going to end up on some picture, and then you'll end up on some hit list in the next administration. Like like everybody in my world is just telling me, don't go, don't go, don't go. But I really want to go.
From many people, but I'm a firm believer that that capital belongs to the American people. You know, we built it. We have skin in the game. You know, my forefathers, you know, they worked hard, man, you know, and they are the ones that put that capital there. That capital has been commandeered by criminals, you know, so I will proudly go there and meet up with them J6 brothers and sisters and, you know, all their little squabbling and this and that. I don't care, man. They got the right to squabble. But you know, that was this year. We're going into next year. So, you know, my goal is to go ahead and hook up with people and just, you know, see where everybody's at mentally. What are we doing? What's the plan? What, you know, just kind of find that group of people that have a plan, you know, that have a clear path forward. Kind of network with some people, and I want to walk. I want to walk the same route that I walked that day, and you know you'll start to remember things that happened that day that you blocked out, you know. So I have some anxiety about going. I'm not scared to go. I just know that the last time I was there, man, they tried to ruin my life, man. You know, they tried to ruin my life, but like I say, you know, all I've done is tell the truth, and I feel strong in the truth, and I will continue to move forward just telling the truth. I'm willing to suffer for telling the truth, you know. So I
Endure.
will be at the Capitol on January 6th.
Yeah, that's great. We'll see. I don't know. It's not decided. Um, we'll see how it goes. Well, Doug, it was great talking to you. I'm so glad we connected today. And Happy New Year's to everybody. Happy New Year to you, Doug.
Yeah, Happy New Year, buddy.
All right, sounds good. You guys, thank you so much. This was Doug Wyatt joining me, and we're jail and prison buddies. Lots of fun. So good to catch up with you. All right, guys, and you guys do see Doug in the chat from time to time. So thank you, Doug.
Oh yeah, thanks for all the people in the chat. I see these people here, Carlitos and you know, all these guys, man. Hey, man, thanks for paying attention. Trying to, you have something real special here, Taylor. You know what I mean? Your podcast. You're just as good as anybody else, man. Like I even would prefer to watch your show over Steve Bannon's, even though I really like him. But you're hard hitting. Bam, 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 bam. You're covering all these topics quickly, and they're well researched, man. You know what I mean? So you have something special here. It's going to take off, man. Tell the other guy, don't watch the news. You know, his reactions are priceless. They're very real. You know.
Back in 2020 when we were going through all the COVID craziness, and I'd pull things up. And he kind of came into the show thinking it was a conspiracy show. Like, yeah, we'll dabble in some government conspiracies. But when I would show him like actual bills and I would show him actual video footage, he was just like, I thought this was a conspiracy show. And I remember looking at him and be like, you thought this was a conspiracy show? Like, this is a news show.
It's like once they see it, you can't unsee it. Once
Yeah,
you see it, you can't unsee it, man. It removes the world that they put in. You can see it clearly now. It's like the Matrix.
the
Everything's the
Truman Show.
Matrix.
Yeah,
Everything before you is for show. It's white noise. It's the whole world is like that, man. And breaking through that, I think we have a chance. We have a platform. So like Andy Frisella, I don't know if you've ever listened to this guy. He's a wild one. But he says something that's very important, man. If you're going to make a difference in your community, you got to start with the man in the mirror. Now you got to be the best you that for me to make a change, I got to be the best Doug Wyatt I can be. That's how you make change. That's where you start. And that's what's contagious. Like my neighbors all around me all know that I was in prison and what I was in prison for, and the people that are catty cornered to me, they're Democrats, man. They won't talk to me. But over the course of the last year, they see me and my family getting up on Sunday morning and go to the church. They see the way my property looks. I take pride in what I do. You know what I mean? They see that. We had a tree fall on the road a couple weeks ago from the high wind, and I'll be damned if that guy who can't stand me is over there with a chainsaw and the other neighbor, and we're all working collectively, together. I assure you, their dislike of me and my family has changed, not because of anything that I said, just because of how I handle myself. That's the big. You be the best you can be, and that's how you affect change, in my view. So anyway, Taylor, man, it's
it's
always
be the change you want to see in the world. It's what Jordan Peterson says: make your own bed. Make your bed first. You can't fix the world's problems if you can't even make your own bed. And yes, everything. You can't fix the world's economy, but you can fix your economy. You can fix your family. You gotta work where you have actual influence, and spend less time on the sphere of concern, which a lot of the world is sphere of concern. Right now, a lot of the sphere of concern is affecting our daily lives, which is why we're paying attention. But yes, if you fix yourself, the whole point of the American experiment, the democratic experiment, we are a republic, but it's a democratic experiment because the government is a mirror of the people, right? It's not the constitution of the government that matters. It's the constitution, the gut, the makeup, the soul of the people that matters. That's why the narrative wins over the facts. We, the people, have a strong willpower to fix our own problems, and we live in a country where we can. And even with all the systemic challenges we have today, if you're not dependent on the government, you can become self-reliant. And the more Americans become self-reliant, the more Americans that say no to government services and government benefit packages that just enslave us to the system, the more we do that, the less that they can pay us off, bribe us off with benefits and payoffs and things like that, right? But that is an individual decision. When you say, I'd rather go to work than take welfare, when the majority of Americans start saying that to themselves, that's when we take back our country. But as long as we are asking what our government can do for us and not what we can do, right, then we're going to just empower, embolden, and enlarge our government. And it will just be a thorn in our sides until it either goes away and then we figure out who rules the ashes, or we have to reform it. And, you just got to keep trucking until you can't truck anymore. That's just endure. I don't even, like you said, suffer for truth. I endure for the truth.
Hey, listen, man. So if you don't come out to J6, you can always live stream me or something, man. You know what I mean? I
Okay.
can be your
We'll do,
on-field correspondent. You know what I
we'll do
mean?
that. We'll do
Hey,
something.
you're
We'll
gonna have
see.
to
We'll
send
see
me
if
a
I go or
shirt.
not.
I need a peasant's perspective. Where's the merchandise sidebar
I
here?
all I've got is stickers. I need to get a shirt.
Come
You're right.
on, man. Need a T-shirt.
All right, guys.
Hey,
All
God
right,
bless,
Doug.
buddy.
Thank you so
You take
much.
care.
All right. We'll talk to everybody later. Bye.